Welcome back to Steve's Project Car Garage. My name is Steve. Sitting behind me here is the transmission out of my 2009 Volkswagen Jetta with a 2.5 liter 5-speed manual. Today I'm going to go over a few things that I'm doing on it because obviously, as you can see, it's out of my car. My last video worked on the Spitfire, kind of talked a little bit about what I was going to be doing. Initially I wasn't going to film this, but I figured I had some questions that popped up and maybe I'll just go ahead and throw it out there for you guys to check out. So stick around, it'll be a different but cool video. So there's nothing wrong with this transmission. This transmission's actually in good shape. It's got about 185,000 miles on it, but it is getting older. The transmission was working just fine, but the clutch was starting to go out on it. After 185,000 miles, well, clutches do tend to wear out. Essentially what would happen is I would go ahead and I'd put my foot in the clutch, and then as I would slowly try to release as usual to get myself started, it would pretty much just go from off to on, and the car would just kind of lurch forward. So essentially there was like no travel or play in the clutch. And this was more or less just due to the fact that the clutch itself was wearing out. Par for the course. If I were 14 years old and 185,000 miles, I'd be wearing out too. So that's what kind of prompted the process of getting this guy pulled out to go ahead and replace the clutch. So in just a few minutes, I'll go ahead and I'll show you what the clutch looked like, and we'll talk about something called a Dual Mass Flyweel, which is a new concept to me. Not really familiar with it, but I have some cool examples that I can compare for you between the Spitfire and what was on the Volkswagen. So looking around my shop, I've got 1, 2, 3 transmissions and an engine. I think I've got a problem. Let me show you some of the old parts though that came out of that. I'll talk about the new parts that are going back in. Alright, so this is the clutch and flywheel and pressure plate out of the Jetta. It's a pretty simple thing when it comes down to the basics of it. Essentially you have 3 components. So I'll break this apart here real quick so I can show you. What I'm going to do here is take the pressure plate off. Now the pressure plate is what actually does, just as it sounds, it applies pressure to the clutch. And the funny thing is I literally just sat this on, but it's a heavy piece of kit. Alright, so this is the pressure plate. These are fingers that are springs essentially. And when you press in the clutch, there is a bearing that presses against this, which is actually part of your clutch release fork. This is your release bearing. And what this does is this presses a lot of pressure onto the clutch, onto the forks here, which then goes ahead and in turn releases the clutch disc from the flywheel. This is a clutch disc. This is the clutch disc out of the Jetta. We'll do some micrometer readings on it so that way you can kind of see what the difference is between a good clutch and a bad clutch. And then you have what's here is called a DMF. This is a dual mass flywheel. Now this differs from a regular flywheel in the sense that this is actually a 2-piece flywheel. You have this inner piece, which is what makes contact with the actual clutch disc itself. But then you have the actual flywheel with the ring gear here that attaches to the back of the engine. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get the flywheel off of the Spitfire so you can see the difference between the two. Alright, so this is a bit of a fun comparison. So here's the clutch disc off of the Jetta, and then the clutch disc off the Spitfire. Look at the size difference on that. It's absolutely incredible. You can also see about thickness-wise, they're just about the same. I'm sure if you put a micrometer on it, though, it'll say otherwise. But this is the flywheel off the Spitfire, and this is the flywheel, the dual mass flywheel off of the Jetta. So the flywheel off the Spitfire is very simple. It's essentially just a great big chunk of steel that has a ring gear attached to it. And it's really just one piece. I mean, yes, you can theoretically press the ring gear off of these, I believe, and replace the ring gear. But in reality, this is just one big chunk of steel. Now, same thing applies here. The clutch will sit on top of it. And you have a pressure plate, and the pressure plate sits on top of the clutch. And then there's a release bearing that presses on this, which helps lift the clutch off of the actual flywheel and disconnects the service. Now what differs is the dual mass side of things. So on the dual mass, it is a two-piece system. So you have this inner piece of the actual flywheel, and then you have the outer piece. And the outer piece is what, again, connects to the actual engine itself. And the reason it's dual mass is because inside of here, and you can hear it, there's a series of springs. And essentially what this does is it dampens the load, and it makes it so that way you have smoother clutch actions, and it reduces vibrations through the actual transmission and into the body of the car. And so you'll find these on more higher end cars like the Volkswagens or the BMWs, for instance, and I'm sure plenty of other ones. But this is something I haven't really seen until I started getting into the European cars. Difference in price too is substantial. So you could get a flywheel, solid flywheel for my Volkswagen, and clutch for about $300 to do a conversion. Otherwise, you could do the dual mass flywheel and the clutch for about $400 and up, depending upon the manufacturer. And that's the big difference. So I got really lucky, and ironically, the name of this company is Luke, or L-U-K, and the DMF, dual mass flywheel, and the clutch combination was just about $400. Whereas if it were a Sachs, which is the other brand that could potentially been in my car, that would have been closer to $800. So I really lucked out with this, and I got the look, and yeah, $400 and we're in. So let me go ahead and show you a bit of the car itself, show you the current state of it, and then we'll come back to the garage. So this is my 2009 Volkswagen Jetta with a 2.5 liter inline 5-cylinder engine. Mated to that was a 5-speed manual gearbox until last Friday. My buddy Chris and I decided that we needed to pull the transmission out. After about 185,000 miles, the clutch was pretty much ready to give up the ghost. So, it took us about 4 hours to do, and we ended up pulling out the entire transmission. I didn't film the removal of the transmission, and I probably won't film the installation of it either because there's going to generally be a lot of cursing that goes on. But maybe I'll set up a camera for a time lapse of us putting it back in. So, let me show you what's going on underneath here. So, in order to do this, we ended up having to remove both the CV axle for the driver's side and passenger side, obviously. We went ahead and jacked up the transmission, placed the transmission on this nifty 5-gallon bucket, and now the engine is kind of sitting on that. This was an interesting job to do because, frankly, access isn't the greatest, but it also really wasn't terrible. I mean, I've certainly dealt with a lot worse access than this, and this really was not that bad. So, this is kind of what we're looking at here. So once this job is done, we're then going to zip back on over to the other side over here, and we're going to replace this guy right down here. That is an AC compressor. Now, obviously, I don't have access or visibility to it, but as you can get an idea, as far as workability is concerned on this car, it's actually pretty easy because you can go ahead and remove these inner fenders, and it's really just a couple of T25 bolts, and they just pop right off. And then access is like right there. So a lot of people do complain that some of these cars, these more modern cars, do have, you know, a lot of problems with getting to things, but I don't think that this one was that bad, frankly. So one of the things that I need to do in the future is go ahead and replace these struts. As you'll see here, this bushing, for instance, is completely rotted out. It's a bump stop. That thing is blown. I know that I've got some real loose connections in here. You know, we take a look at these. I think this is what the sway bar end link is completely shot. We had to undo the bottom ball joint also, right down here, you can see. So I'm gonna have to definitely check that out because I feel that the rubber is completely shot. So that's something else I'll end up having to do. Of course, there's surface rust on the calipers because it's been exposed and it rained out yesterday, but ain't no biggie. Coming around to the back, remember I talked to you guys before when I talked about this car in the last video when I did on this. I'm going to end up having to take the bumper off and seal up a hole that is kind of causing water to get into the trunk. But once I do that, get the shocks done, get the AC fixed, I think we'll actually be in pretty decent shape. So that's about it for this side. I'll get you guys back inside in just a few minutes. Alright, so I wanted to start by showing the difference between the new dual mass flywheel and the old one. So this kind of reminds me of a pizza box, but It's an expensive pizza at that, if it were a pizza, but this is the replacement DMF. Now, let me lift this guy out. Well, he's probably about 20 pounds, 25 pounds. So, new versus old. Let's do a side-by-side comparison. So, obviously this looks a lot more beat up, a lot more miles on it. This has a little bit of surface rust, not a big deal. We'll go ahead and just kind of glaze that back or seal that up a little bit before I go ahead and put it in. But I want to just demonstrate, see how loose that is versus this, which is, you can feel it's definitely pretty solid. That tells me that the springs in this are pretty weak and that it was definitely a good idea to go ahead and purchase a replacement. I had the transmission out, I may as well do it. But as you can see, they're both LUK, L-U-K, L-U-K. And then if we go ahead and flip them over on the back side, these should look identical. Looks like this has some weights on it to kind of counterweight it. This does not have any, so I'm guessing that this needed to be balanced a little bit. This one probably came from the factory pretty well balanced. So that is the Dual Mass Flyweel. Again, the Dual Mass Flyweel itself was pretty expensive. If I remember correctly, it was about $280, which is the more expensive part than the actual clutch itself. Go figure, but this is definitely a bit of a nicer unit, I can tell. And I think that it'll do me well by replacing it. Because when I look at this travel, I hear that clicking. That definitely tells me that those springs are ready to go, because this sounds a lot better and it's a lot tighter. So that's the Dual Mass Flyweel. Let's go on and compare the clutch pressure plate and the clutch pad itself. All right, so we have another LUK pizza box. Let's see here. Order receipt. So, this is the clutch kit that you can buy. I got this all from Rock Auto, and the clutch kit itself ran me $108, I think, which in my opinion is an absolute bargain. But let's go ahead and talk about what comes in it. So in this kit, you get a new release bearing, which is what this guy is. So essentially we'll have to pop this release bearing out. It should actually just come out with these two little clips here and just pretty much fall right out. So we'll do that. We'll get this all cleaned up so it looks nice. So we have the new release bearing here. And then inside, well, let's go ahead and flip this over. We have the new pressure plate. And new pressure plate looks pretty much just like the old one. So let's see. Yeah, I mean, it's identical. I don't see anything that's different. Same number of teeth. You got the small little springs. These springs are definitely more compressed. I'm guessing this is just self-adjusting. That's probably why these are pushed out more. I would imagine this is probably self-adjusting clutch release or clutch plate. And I mean, look at the surface on that. It's obviously a nice new surface, very clean. So that's that. Now, let's move on to the discs. This is the new versus the old. You know, it's got a little bit of wobble to it, but this is feeling pretty solid. And let's look at the thickness on these. So you can definitely see the new is certainly a lot thicker than the old. Let's go. So that's the old clutch on its way out. I mean, you can see here where the rivets pretty much pop right through. They're almost to the surface. And on this one, they've definitely got some good meat on them. So pretty stoked to get this guy on in there. So let's go ahead and button this back on up. One last thing that I've totally forgot is that this also comes with some lube, some grease for the spline itself, and it also comes with a clutch alignment tool, which is pretty cool. Some of the Saks kits don't even come with a clutch accessory, so the alignment tool you have to buy separate. So pretty happy that this kit actually comes with it. And this is about $100 from Rock Auto. All right, so this is the gearbox itself, as I had talked about earlier. It is pretty gross. One of the things that you should do on these is go ahead and do a fluid change on them. And so I'll definitely be doing that on this. The service interval for the fluid actually on this is once every 60,000 miles. But the only way to change the fluid is to do it with the transmission out of the car. So whomever at Volkswagen that decided that that was a great service interval for fluid on the transmission, yeah, thanks, dude. Because I'm not going to pull a transmission out every 60,000 miles just so I can change the fluid in it. And we've had this car for 12 years, something like that. We've never changed the fluid on it. So I did call the Volkswagen dealership. They do have the fluid in stock, so I'll have to pick some of that up on Friday. But one of the things that's really important is that before you go ahead and change the fluid on one of these, you want to go ahead and make sure that the gearbox itself, where you're going to be pulling fluid in and out of, is clean. And so I figured I'd take this opportunity to go ahead and hit it with some degreaser and some brake clean, and just kind of clean this up a little bit. So let me go ahead and get suited up real quick. And we're going to go ahead and kind of clean this down and get it ready for that fluid change. So over here we have one of the, this is the fill plug, and actually the drain plug's on the bottom. But what I'm going to do is take some of this brake clean. I'm just going to hit it. And just start wiping it down. And I got this little scrubby pad. So I'm just going to start cleaning, because really I want to make sure this area here is nice and clean. But if I'm doing it, I may as well make sure that the rest of it looks halfway decent. Brake clean's a really nice solvent that is used to obviously clean brakes, but man, it works for just about everything. And so, as you can see, you just spray this stuff on and then that dirt melts away. And so I got this pad that's underneath it to just kind of absorb it. So it can all just soak in there. All right. So now getting to the bottom is going to be a challenge, because I don't want to flip the transmission on its side or anything like that, because there is a breather and we don't want to have fluid come out. So I'm going to just kind of hit the bottom as best I can and let the mat catch it all. Alright, well, and just like that, we have a pretty decently clean transmission. Again, it's not spotless, it's not going to be for a show car, it's my daily driver. But, for the most part, it is a lot better than it was before. Alright, so that's where we're going to leave it off for tonight with the transmission. Got it cleaned up, got it ready to go ahead and get cracked open to get the fluid changed on it. I did go ahead and actually already crack this open just a little bit to make sure I could loosen it up. That is one thing that is common, is to go ahead and drain all the fluid out and then go ahead and try to crack your fill hole up and find out that you can't get it open. So Friday, I'm going to go ahead and go over to the Volkswagen dealership, get some fluid, and then we'll go ahead and get this guy cracked open, get the fluid changed out on it, so that way we can get prepared to go ahead and slap this guy back into the Jetta on Saturday morning. So stick around, I'll see you in a few. Alright, welcome back. So we got the gearbox over here. It is now Friday night. It is time to go ahead and drain the fluid and get ready. Chris is going to be here in about 14 hours to go ahead and slap this guy back in with me. So we want to make sure that we get the fluid out of this. We're going to get that release bearing put in and yeah, get this thing ready to be dropped in. So let me get you set up. I'll show you how to get this fluid drained, and then we'll go fill it. All right, so as I showed you before, we have the fill hole over here. So that's the fill plug, and then on the bottom, we have the drain. And the drain plug is right here. So what I did earlier is I cracked that fill plug loose just to make sure I can open it. And so that's definitely good. We can do that because we don't want to drain this and not be able to fill it back up. So we're going to go ahead and get now that drain cracked open. I have the bucket here sitting on my tool bench. Kind of works out pretty well. So let's get this thing drained. All right, so now that I got this thing drained, that took quite a while. There was a lot of rocking back and forth to get the oil to come out because frankly, it all just did not come out the way I was expecting it to, which is fine. I'm gonna go ahead and fill this guy back up. Now, I went to the Volkswagen dealership to actually get the right gear oil, and so this is what it is. It's actually in liters. And so this transmission takes 1.7 liters. So I went ahead and I marked about where 7/10 of the liter will be. So we'll do this full one first, and then we will do the 7/10 afterwards. So let's see how well this will work. There was definitely not 2 liters of fluid that came out of this thing. I would say I'd be lucky if I had a full liter. I'm surprised I didn't have shifting issues, frankly, but it's not leaking anywhere. I'm guessing that it's over the years it got a lot thicker because that's pretty viscous. Or shall I say, it's rather thin compared to what I would expect and what came out. And we're ready. All right, that's it. Let me go ahead and get this guy on in. All right, who had fun with that fluid change? I know I sure did. So here we are now with the clutch release bearing. We talked about this earlier in the video. This is kind of what I thought was a little bit suspect, frankly, earlier. I mean, the bearing is pretty hard to move. This one's not the easiest to move either. But, yeah, this thing's definitely seen some better days. It's also a little bit of a different design, if you take a look at it. And I'm surprised to see plastic, but I'm guessing that's probably plastic too. Anyways, let's go ahead and get this guy popped off. Get the new one placed on. So to pop this off, I think that really all that we need to do is just pry back these little metal clips. And I don't even think we need a tool for that. Look at that, it just fell apart. That little clip just kind of fell right out. That's awesome. So we got the new bearing. And it should just go ahead and clip right in. Well, it should just clip right in.
5 minutes later.
All right, well, don't panic. I flipped it over, so whoops. This should work for us though. So I'm just gonna kind of wipe this down real quick while I'm here. All right. Thank goodness for recording my content because I would have known otherwise, and I probably would have thought and struggled with this, but this just clips in like that. Hey, that's what I was expecting. So there's really not a lot that holds that thing in there. That's really kind of sketchy, but I mean, hey, this was hanging in there barely. All right, cool. So that is the clutch release bearing. It is supposed to have free travel and play like that. But let's go ahead and install the fork back onto the transmission. All right, so this might be entertaining for some of you to watch me struggle because I've tried putting this on once before and it did not happen. So what happens though is the bottom of the fork here sits into this little clip, and this little clip here protrudes through here and is what holds it into place. Although meanwhile, you have to get this on here. So let's see if I can make this happen without cursing all that much. Yeah. Here we go. Ha! Got it. There we go. That's more like it. Okay, it's in. Fantastic. So you see this little clip. Well, I guess you can't really see it too well. Let me zoom in. There you go. So this little clip needed to protrude through this hole, and that's held in place. And then what happens is up here, where my finger is, this way, there's a piston that pushes to actuate, and what that does is that pushes against those forks on the pressure plate, applies pressure, clutch disengages. Here we go. All right, that's gonna do it for tonight. I'm gonna go ahead and get cleaned up and get ready for Chris. He's gonna be here at around 9 a.m. Then we'll go ahead and just throw some time lapse on while we get this guy installed, because frankly, I don't know how much film I'm gonna be doing through that, but you can at least watch and maybe get some good laughs. Check you in a minute. All right, Saturday morning. Sorry, Chris.
Bright and early.
That's right. We're gonna put in a clutch and transmission.
Yep.
Maybe do an AC compressor.
And if we get ahead of the curve, we're gonna do that.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
All right, so what we're gonna do here is we're gonna get started by putting on the flywheel, the dual mass flywheel that I was talking about earlier. We'll get that torqued down. It's gonna be 44 foot-pounds per bolt, and then we have to crank them 90 degrees. Once we get that on, we'll install the clutch, and yeah, then it's time to start manhandling a transmission into place. So we'll do a little time lapse for pretty much everything. I'm not gonna do a lot of step-by-step because frankly, there's a lot better videos out there than what I'm gonna make for how to do this. But you guys wanted to see the process, so here we do.
Now, those will take quite a few turns until it's pulled onto there, so
Yeah.
you might as well just start working your way around. I doubt you'll be able to turn the motor until it's settled, but you want to keep it really square, even though it's not too square.
All right, so we have these bolts now in. We have the dual mass flywheel attached. Now I need to go ahead and use the torque wrench to set them to 44 foot-pounds each. So we're gonna do that, and then we're gonna go ahead and turn them again at 90 degrees, and that'll be it. All right, so I'll show you what we did. Nice one, Chris. So I put a paint mark on the flywheel to indicate 12 o'clock. And so we tightened all these bolts down to 44 foot-pounds. But then I went ahead and I put a paint mark on each one of the bolts on the top. And then that way, you can hardly see it right now, but you can see we did the 44 foot-pounds and then we did 90 degrees. And so now these are on there nice and tight. These are torqued to spec. These are one-time use bolts, brand new. So these guys are good to go. The flywheel is on and it ain't coming off again. So we're gonna go ahead now and get this cleaned up a little bit because we need to hit it with some brake clean just to clean the surfaces. Then we're gonna go ahead and mount the the pressure plate and the clutch. All right, so the clutch is in, the pressure plate is on. We tightened down the pressure plate to 10 foot-pounds or 120 inch-pounds, as the Haynes manual says, which really threw me for a loop. So that's on there, that's good. So at this point, I think that we are just about ready to go ahead and slap this transmission in. So we're gonna take a minute, get a drink, and then get ready to go ahead and put this thing together.
Many unbearable hours later.
All right. So, how you doing, Chris?
I am enjoying the shade.
Yeah?
If you're gonna work hard, work in the shade.
That's right. All right, so we finally have the transmission in. Now, it's not bolted in, but we have it lined up, and we have 2 bolts started. That was an absolute pain in the ass. There's no question about it. We had to bring the cherry picker out. We actually used the cherry picker to lift the transmission into place. There was a lot of shifting and cursing, and yeah. That's why I didn't record the removal, because I figured there'd be a lot of cursing. So what we're going to do now is we're going to get these bolts put in. We're going to start lining it up, start driving it home, get the transmission tight up to the engine, and then start putting it back together. We'll catch up with you in a few. All right, so we're back. We've had a little bit of lunch. Bell housing is bolted up. The engine braces are on. The engine mounts, rather, transmission mounts. I need to go ahead and get the spider put on. That's going to have the shift linkage. Once I get that on, then we're just going to keep working on the top. Get this all buttoned up. Stick around. All right, so we have an update. Chris is currently working on air conditioning. Yeah. We're not going to cover that, but in this, while we had it all apart, I said let's go ahead and replace the AC compressor because it has not had AC in a while. So we're doing that now. I got the linkages all hooked up, got the starter put back in. Now I'm working on putting in the battery box. We still have to do the CV on the passenger side. We did the CV on the driver's side already.
You gotta put the belts on.
We need to put the belts on. We need to put the ball joint back together.
And that CV.
Yep, so we're getting pretty close though. Fingers crossed we can do it before the sun goes down because, well, we had to put the tent up because it was getting pretty hot over here, but we got about another hour and a half, and I think that we might be able to do it. What do you think?
Oh yeah, it's gonna go together.
Cool. Let's keep running. All right, there you have it. It's buttoned up. We haven't driven it yet. We're back on the ground. We got cold air conditioning. We checked the gears. It seems to be good, but we haven't driven it yet. So Chris and I are gonna go for a quick spin.
Cool.
All right. Oh, hey. Whoa, yeah, that's very different from the way it used to be. Okay, let's back it up. Back it up. Back it up. Oh yeah, that clutch feels very catchy.
I know, I'm assuming that's the best kind of test drive.
Yeah.
Nothing to talk about.
Exactly. Well,
so you have a lot of tools to clean at home.
We do.
What's this wee kimosabe?
I guess we'll go ahead and wrap up the video.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chris, for the help. It's been greatly appreciated. You spent 2 Saturdays with me knocking this out, and I think that we have now breathed another 150,000 miles of life back into this car. So with that, remember to always use your turn signals, and don't be that dreaded previous owner. Cheers.